and welcome to this week's episode of Did Shakespeare. I'm Cassidy Cash. When you think of London, England, you almost always think of Charles Dickens's image of London with the well-lit gas street lamps lighting the pathways at night and the fog rolling in. It's all very beautiful, but for William Shakespeare, it was all very not there at all. The use of gas street lamps and later electric street lamps were things that didn't show up in London, England for hundreds of years after the death of William Shakespeare. So when it came to getting around at night from place to place, or even just working at his workstation, did William Shakespeare have street lamps? Historical records tell us that there was a way for people to get around at night during the life of William Shakespeare, but we also know that gas lamps and electric street lamps, the way we think of them today with the long pole, the light, and positioned at various places along the street to light the pathway, simply didn't exist for William Shakespeare. Instead, they had two different methods that were the most popular for lighting things outside at night. The first one we know about is from a record of the 1417 mayor of London. His name was Sir Henry Barton. He declared anyone living near the streets in London in 1417 had to hang a lantern outside of their home on winter evenings between Hallowtide and Candlemas. That's roughly October through February 2nd, which was Candlemas. Despite the order, not many people followed it, which meant if you were outside trying to walk around during the life of William Shakespeare, it was very dark. You couldn't see anything aside from what you were able to see from the light of the moon and the stars. And that meant if you were going to try and get from the pub to your house or from one location to the next, or if you were hanging out at a friend's house at a party, if you wanted to head home, you most likely hired what was called a link boy. A link boy was a boy who carried a flaming torch to light the way for his patron. Link boys were very common in London prior to the invention of street lights, and they are even mentioned in Shakespeare's play Henry IV Part 1. Falstaff is teasing Bardolph about the shininess of his red face, and he teases him by saying, quote, "Thou hast saved me 1,000 marks in links and torches, walking with thee in the night betwixt tavern and tavern." So we learn several things from that quote from Falstaff. The first is that people did get around from place to place at night. The second is that one of the most common ways of doing that was by hiring a link or link boy. Links and torches in this line from Henry IV Part 1 is a reference to the use of a link boy. A link boy was a commonly paid about 1 farthing, and he would carry this, he could carry any kind of light source, so it could have been a candle, but it was most often a torch, which is basically a bunch of rushes or flammable material wrapped up tight and then lit on the end. So you've seen them in movies, the idea of carrying a torch. That's most often what they used. It was called pitch and tow because the end of this torch he was carrying was covered in a tar-like substance called pitch. It's very flammable, but it causes the flame to last a long time. If you were to just light the tow or this fiber, cone-shaped fiber, if you were to just light that, it would make a lot like kindling for a fire. It's going to burn up very quickly. So they covered the end in what's called pitch so that you could light it and the flame would last long enough for you to go on a journey. And so the link boy would carry this torch and you would pay him to be your guide, to literally light the way from one place to the next when you were traveling at night. And there are even some houses that had a link snuffer attached to the outside of their house so that when the link boy arrived with his patron, they could snuff out the candle. Interestingly, link boys would also accompany what's called a litter or a sedan chair. This was a popular way of getting around during William Shakespeare's lifetime that we'll cover in another episode. But these link boys would also travel around with the sedan chairs as a mode of transportation. So these boys were basically like the headlights on your car when you were getting around before they had headlights or before they had cars. Instead, 2 footmen would be carrying the litter and the link boys would travel along with it, lighting the path. The reason they're called link boys is because the material that was lit to be burned as the light source was often called a link. It was the wick, basically, of the torch. And there was a thieves language called the Thieves Cant that was basically like Pig Latin, but in the 16th century. It was this made-up language that was used in the thieves community to communicate so that the people you were trying to rob weren't understanding you. But a link boy in the Thieves Cant was called a Glim Jack, and the Glim translates to light. They were also sometimes called a moon cursor. Obviously, because they wouldn't be useful until the moon came out. Now, employing a link boy could be a dangerous decision because you never knew if the person guiding you was really a good guide or not. They could be leading you into an alleyway where you would be robbed. Most of them were probably going to get you where you wanted to go, but you are taking the risk that you're going to find one that takes you somewhere you don't want to be. The history of the link boy shows up in our common English vernacular today in that we use the phrase to hold a candle to someone. During the Renaissance and throughout the life of William Shakespeare, being a link boy was a very low status position. It was the bottom rung of what you could do. And so the expression became, if you can't hold a candle to somebody, it means that you aren't even good enough to be their link boy. That's it for this week. I'm Cassie Cash, and I hope you learned something new about the Bard. If you like learning about the history of William Shakespeare, please hit like and subscribe, and don't forget to click the notification bell at the bottom of the YouTube video, because that way YouTube will send you a notification every time we launch a new episode. And we're here every Saturday with more history about William Shakespeare, so you don't want to miss out on that. If you want to go even further into the history of William Shakespeare, I invite you to join our email community. It is completely free, and when you sign up to our email community, I send you free artwork, guides, maps, and diagrams all about the life of William Shakespeare. You get those completely free just for being a member of the email community, and it averages about one diagram or artwork piece a month. Sometimes it's even more than that. If you're interested in signing up for that, find more history and the place to sign up for the email list all at CassieCash.com. That's it. I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.